Rick Miracle Me. It is January 10th, 2019. I keep running across some very interesting material to share. One document I discovered recently, I think I was watching one of the Deborah Travaris videos, or one of the many other videos where they're predicting a catastrophe in America and maybe the world. But anyways, this one here, you can go look up this document. Surviving a Catastrophic Power Outage. Quarterly Business Meeting, December 13th, 2018, by the President's National Infrastructure Advisory Council. So why would they be predicting a catastrophic power outage? You know, I think every area has a coal plant or an oil plant or a nuclear power plant. How could they take them all down? Well, theoretically, by accident, it couldn't happen. But if they declare some kind of an emergency or some kind of threat, or they want to bring about a great change in America and the world, maybe they would intentionally shut down the electric grid. Says here the agenda: review background, scoping effort overview, National Security Council tasking, study approach, catastrophic power outage definition, discuss recommendations, and answer questions. So you can go look up this document, quite a few pages. Scoping effort overview, tasked to identify the gaps, challenges, or questions related to a catastrophic power outage. Interviewed 21 senior leaders and subject matter experts from federal, state government, and industry. Why would they be doing this at this time? And then all those videos on YouTube where they're predicting an EMP or a pole shift or something crazy. Global warming or global cooling, extreme climate change due to the CO2 usage by we the people. Apparently, they're saying global warming or climate change, choose whichever name you want, they change it all the time, is caused by we the people. And who runs things? It's certainly not we the people. Reviewed more than 350 resources, including statutes, regulations, report articles, and prior studies. Why would they be reviewing all of the statutes and regulations of law about a power outage? Identified 8 key areas of inquiry for an in-depth examination, completed in June 2018. So this is all pretty current stuff. Somebody's planning something, so it seems. The NSC tasking background. The nation has made significant advancements in emergency response and recovery planning over the past decade in response to the growing occurrence of complex disasters. Growing occurrence of complex disasters. What about those strange laser beams people are seeing in the fires in California? Or also the exploded smart meters on the back of people's houses. Seems like that's where the fires started. And all the chemtrails and weird patterns on satellite radar systems when they have hurricanes and things like that. I talked to somebody in South Carolina the other day, and he said, Rick, it's a problem here. It's been raining for 2 months steady. Is somebody causing this? It seems like they are. Do they have an agenda? It appears that they do. It's called a global world order. You need to crush the system. You need to make the people suffer so bad that they will beg for some kind of control mechanisms. They will scream and holler for globalism and communism and other types of controls on us. Even the probably screaming to take away the guns, and the people that refuse, shoot them and prison them. It's easy to control the minds of people because most people don't think with their brains, they think with their emotions. Just like 911, nobody paid any attention to the details. They said they found a passport had floated down from the wreckage of a plane hitting the building, landing on the sidewalk with the identification of one of the perpetrators, an Arab, who maybe was flying the plane, and his passport just blew out, landed on the ground. Does anybody really believe that? Given the interconnected nature of critical systems and networks, new broad scale approaches are needed to adequately prepare for, respond to, and recover from catastrophic disasters that can create significant power outages with severe cascading impacts to multiple critical sectors. Now, somebody please tell me why they would be doing this. Is this some kind of social conditioning? Nice big letters like this. How often do you see nice big letters like this and this kind of format for a government document? Usually you see little fine print. NSC tasking May 21, 2018. The desired outcome of this study is a greater understanding how the public and private sectors can work together to further enhance and integrate critical infrastructure resilience with response and recovery actions to mitigate the risk posed by catastrophic power outages. Using the insights gathered during the current scoping effect, the NIAC should develop findings and actionable pragmatic recommendations. I guess somebody copied this out of a report and made the big print. It says on the bottom here, see report pages 27 and 28. The NSC tasking questions: what investments, including approaches to increase resilience and reliability, are needed in infrastructure systems and supply chains to minimize the duration, extent, and recovery time for long duration, large scale power outages? What are the roles of the private and public sectors in these investments? What critical factors are required to sustain national security, operations within the banking and finance, public health, medical communications, transportation, water sectors, and the integrity of the national and regional economies during efforts to restore electrical power? So anyways, there's a lot of pages to this document, and I keep saying a lot of it is propaganda and social conditioning in an effort to bring about a global world order. So with that in mind, I've been reading another book that's kind of unbelievable and will make us possibly give us a clue to why they're doing all the crazy things they're doing. So the name of the book, The Enemy Within the Empire, A Short History of the Bank of England by Eric Butler. So it says here, in view of the disastrous policy followed by the Bank of England after the last war, and part of it is believed to have played in the rearmament of Germany, does not the Right Honorable Gentleman Sir John Simon consider it time that the people knew a bit more about the proprietors of this unique concern? Mr. R. Stokes on the British House of Commons, April 16, 1940. So the bottom line is, was World War II planned, and how was it financed? How in the world did Germany get rearmed after a crushing blow after World War I, where they put such final constraints on it and all kinds of other physical restraints, that the people were suffering, starving and dying? There was no money, there was no industry. Somebody intentionally had to turn that all around after World War One. So between World War One, let's say 1920, I know the war ended in 1918 or 17, but give it a couple years for the dust to settle, 1920, and the beginning of World War II, 1940, just using whole numbers here, uh, that's only 20 years. 20 years is a short period of time. Realize this is 2019. Wasn't that long ago. It was 2000 and 2001 and 911. So somebody intentionally did it, and it cost trillions of dollars. How did it happen? And who is this Eric Butler? So I've been doing my homework, reading his material for the past couple days, looking up some documents about him. One document on Wikipedia. I'd like to talk about him before I start reading from his book. Very informative information. Probably really important. Background and early career. Eric Butler, born 7 May 1916, and he died in 2006. Australian political activist and a journalist, and the founder of the Australian League of Rights. So even in Australia, there's been a lot of weird things going on, and intentional immigrating a lot of Asians into Australia, causing a lot of social problems and overpopulation. So who was doing this and why? And is it a good thing? Is somebody having a purpose here, an intention here, a goal here? According to Eric Butler, absolutely. Butler was born in the Victorian County town of Burnella, although he lived most of his life near Melbourne. In the 1930s, he became a follower of the British economist C.H. Douglas and his social credit theories. Social credit theories. I know right now in China, they're already operating on a social control computerized system where people are given credits or debits depending on their behavior. So if you're doing the perfect things, reporting to work on time and maybe not drinking anything or throwing any litter on the ground or whatever, you'll get nice scores and you'll be able to be a citizen who enjoys all the benefits. But on the other hand, if you're considered a troublemaker or doing things that the government doesn't want you to do because they're watching you 24/7, you get demerits. And you get enough demerits, they come to get you. Re-education, prison. You can't get on a bus or a train or a credit card or have a job or rent an apartment. This is going on right now in China. This should scare the heck out of the rest of us. So the social credit theories. From 1938, Butler wrote for the Australian social credit newspaper New Times. So he was actually writing for a newspaper, so he was a writer. Butler served with the Australian Army during World War II. According to one of his obituaries, he served as a gun sergeant for 20 months without leave in the Torres Straits, taught troops as an instructor for the Canagray Jungle Training School for 6 months. So the guy was a military jungle training man, wrote in the newspapers, served in the military as a gun sergeant for 20 months without leave. And then he transferred to the officers training school at Seymour, Victoria, and was honorably discharged at the end of the Pacific phase of the war, of World War II. So it sounds like he has a really good background, somebody we might want to listen to. I like to look into these people with my videos, Freemasonry and Satanism, book reviews. I'm trying to figure out WTH, what the heck is going on? What the heck has gone on? And what the heck is going to happen in the future? And we have all kinds of clues to these things. So I think if we can figure out what happened in the past and what's going on now, we can probably deduce what's going to happen in our future. And I think all these things that they're doing, preparing for some kind of worldwide revolution. And even YouTube taking down only one video have over 600 videos on YouTube, but one video they took down, Nestor Webster's 1921 book, World Revolution. Go look that book up on a used book site, Nestor Webster. Get that book, World Revolution, and you'll see who's behind all of this. Freemasons, Illuminati, and radical Zionist Jewish people vying for a global world order. And back then, even, and for the previous 100 or 2 years, seriously desiring to have the state of Israel created, to recreate the ancient kingdom of Judea, which extends from the Iraqi Euphrates down to the Egyptian Nile, which from that area they will control the entire globe. This is in the Protocols of Zion and in 100 other books I've gone over in my series, Freemasonry and Satanism. So when you go over this many books, you made as many videos as I have, many of them 2 hours, you kind of look at this book and you read it, and you can kind of either believe it or disbelieve it. And I tend to believe what Eric Butler wrote in the book I'm about to share with you, Enemy from Within. So anyways, more about Eric Butler. In December 1941, the Commonwealth's chief publicity officer, E.G. Bonney, banned a series of Butler's New Times newspaper articles, one of which described Soviet Russia as a Jewish slave state, and that's exactly what it was. According to many documents, even Jeff Rentz on his site has a well-written essay indicating that 100 million Christians and other good people were killed after the Russian Revolution, which was in 1917, right after the end of World War I. So the Russians, the Tsar, the leader, and the people there probably never saw this coming. It was well planned and executed, and then the destruction of 100 million people, plus or minus, I think 25 million people admitted in a popular Israeli newspaper. Some people say it was 66 million. So it was almost identical to a 9/11 event where they told everybody they found that passport and then proceeded to destroy, overthrow all those countries in the Middle East. And after the mercenaries espionage event snuck in a bunch of agents and military, taking over the train stations, like I said, the people never saw this coming, abducted the Tsar, his families, executed them all, and then for the next 10, 20 years proceeded to kill 100 million Christians and other good people, destroying the Christian churches. So that was an anti-Christian effort, and that, of course, would have been the Zionist, Jewish, Illuminati, Freemasons, mystery religion of Babylon, Kabbalah, sorcery, alchemy, Zohar, whatever you want to call it. They definitely want to destroy Christianity. I've gone over a lot of books on this, so I can say that. So Mr. Eric Butler, with his background here, described in his writings in the newspaper that Soviet Russia was a Jewish slave state. And it was. It was a communist state. Bolshevik, Jewish communist, which extended its reach into China and caused a big revolution there, killing millions and untold millions of people, bringing us today communist China, where everybody is now under surveillance, watched 24/7, and controlled. A perfectly controlled zombie robotic society. I believe they have it planned for Europe and America and the world. And they even say the words globalism, global currency, global religion, cashless society, microchipping children, facial recognition systems, even those boxes, Echo, Siri, Google, you can just talk to and it turns the lights off and on. And what else do you think it's doing? People arguing in their homes and the box calls the police. Crazy system, AI, artificial intelligence, permeating all aspects of our reality. It's planned. Back to this document. So he said it was controlled by the international Jewish financiers in New York. In 1945, the Attorney General, Dr. H.V. Everett, began an inquiry into Butler's activities. He told Parliament, in the opinion of the Director General of Security, this is 1945, after World War II. Butler has written articles constituting an attempt to create adverse public reaction to war loan campaigns and to the war effort generally. So Mr. Eric Butler knew about the war, who was behind it, and was trying to alert the public, and the people who were running the war didn't want him to do that. In 1946, Butler published The International Jew. And I've been trying to find that book or essay, whatever it was he wrote, and I've been all over the internet for several hours, and I haven't been able to get it. Eric Butler's 1946, The International Jew, in which he claimed that Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and John Curtin were covert communists. And it does appear, according to my research, that the Zionist communists were certainly in control of the USA government and the European government, British government, all plotting another destruction for Germany and much of the world. So they were covert communists, and the Russian Revolution was a Jewish plot. It was the Bolshevik, they call it a revolution. But if you look into what actually happened, it was espionage. There was abduction, foreign troops at the train stations, and mass murder for 20 years, 15 years. They had an Iron Curtain. There was a blackout all over Russia after World War I, up until World War II. And then after World War II, the blackout continued. But half of the countries in the Balkans and half of Germany and all that, they did build an iron or stone and iron wall, giving all that other land to communist Russia. And that lasted till what, 1991? So when they took it down, they did it for a reason. And when they said they freed Russia, they did it for a reason. Do people really believe that internally the people rose up and took their country back and distributed the monies and assets equitably, fairly? Does anybody believe that? And that Russia is the world's friend right now? Is China the world's friend? Who controls it? It's the communists. And even some people, certain individuals from these secret societies, plotted to create the EU, the European Union, where those countries are now governed by selected individuals, not elected individuals. This is part of the global world order. They think elected individuals and the citizens having a voice is a huge call me paranoid, but every time I start doing these videos or looking up things, my computer starts flaking out on me. How advanced are they as to being able to interfere with what we're doing? It's an interesting question. It might surprise us, the answer. So as I was saying, we the people wanting to make decisions and have leaders that we elect is an annoyance to these dictator type people who want to control our reality, have a global world order, basically an enslavement of the population. And that is the population apparently left alive after a depopulation event. There's plenty of evidence to show that's what they're intending to do. So I was finishing reading this document here. So the Russian Revolution, according to Eric Butler, was a Jewish plot, and that the Nazi Holocaust was a myth. Butler's eologist Nigel Jackson described this book as an essay built around the analysis of the controversial protocols of Zion. That would have been his book, The International Jew, which I've not been able to find. In it, Butler challenged the Jewish role in international finance and its connections with communism. Of all Butler's publications, this was perhaps the one that roused the greatest fury. This was hardly surprising in the wake of the Nazi Holocaust, particularly since the protocols were well known in 1947 to be a forgery. And I don't believe the protocols are a forgery. They go back into the 1880s and 1890s and are mentioned in a lot of books. But when you read the different things printed like this, they like to throw things in there like that so people will believe the deception. So it seems. So it says here, Butler founded the South Australian League of Rights in 1946, centered around the anti-bank nationalist campaign and subsequent state branches before the Australian League of Rights was abolished in 1960. Butler served as its national director until his retirement in 1992. Although Butler ran for the Australian House of Representatives as an independent, in 1951, the League was not intended to be a political party. Rather, it was a lobby group and grassroots organization promoting Butler's mix of anti-communist, social credit, monarchist, and pro-British ideas. So there's a lot more here on the Wikipedia article you can go look up. Before we do that, I just want to look at a couple other documents. I couldn't find the International Jew written by him, but on archive.org, I did find the book I'm going over today, so you can find it for free here. So here's some of the books when I looked up the International Jew on archive.org. And there's a lot there about Henry Ford's books, as you can see, Independent. I looked up the International Jew on archive.org and found plenty of results. So that'd be another interesting thing to do. Just go on archive.org, plug in International Jew, and see the results. All free PDFs, at least free for now, and available for now. It just makes you wonder when things like this will be taken down. Plenty of evidence on archive.org. Look at this guy near my finger. Jew World Order Mind Control. So this isn't me saying these things. The People versus the Jew World Order by Chris Doherty. So there's plenty of evidence in all the research I've been going over that all of this is true, that we do have a situation on our hands. Just some more documents here. I went on Abe Used Books and put in Eric Butler. And I did find some of his books here. So maybe I just need to look harder. Censored History by Eric Butler. The Essential Christian Heritage by Eric Butler. So archive.org. The Money, Power versus Democracy, Eric Butler. Communist Instrument for World Conquest by Eric Butler. I mean, at what point do people get it and say, wait a minute, do we want a global world order? And do we want something that's anti-Christian? And do we want to be microchipped and monitored and controlled like slaves? And of course, they want to thin the world population by billions. Do we really want that? Or we believe in the propaganda of overpopulation? The truth about the Australian League of Rights. How to defend industrial unrest. So I did several days worth of research. The real communist menace, the Fabian socialist. So Eric Butler, I mean, how many people ever heard of Eric Butler? The Fabian socialist contribution to the communist advance. The real communist menace, the Canadian Royal Commissioner's report on espionage and other communist activities in Canada. Social dynamics, steps towards a monopoly state, examination and social conspiracy by Eric Butler. A basic course in the communist conspiracy by Eric Butler on Abu's books. A program for halting the financing and economic blood transfusions of the communists. Leisure by Eric Butler. So plenty of 40, 50-page books you can pick up on, but I try to find them free on the internet. Releasing Reality, Social Credit and the Kingdom of God, Eric Butler. Communism Can Be Defeated Without a Third World War by Eric Butler. Should we listen to Eric Butler? So anyways, let's see what page is that. One more page here. I found some other documents. Here's Eric Butler. Says here on the culturecollection.com Eric Butler profile. Eric Dudley Butler, May 7th, 1916 to 7 June 2006. Australian political activist and journalist, and was founder of the Australian League of Rights. In 1946, Butler published The International Jew, in which he confirmed that Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, John Curtin were covert communists, that the Russian Revolution was a Jewish plot. All of this seems to be true, and that the Nazi Holocaust was largely a myth. And I went over that book on the Serbia during the war, and apparently there were a lot of communist Jewish people trying to cause disturbances in Syria and found themselves arrested or shot. So probably that was happening all over Europe. I know the communists were a big problem in the United States, and according to Eric Butler in that list on A-Books, it was a problem in Canada. So the communists were busy all over the world, like in China and in Russia. 200 million people murdered. And of course, all their assets and properties and whatever wealth were taken away, seized. Somebody got it all. And since then, these people have been ripping off the United States and the world, controlling the banking systems. In it, Butler charged that the Jewish role in international finance and its connections with communism, of all Butler's publications, this was perhaps the one which roused the greatest fury from powerful vested Jewish interest. So you can talk about Chinese, you can talk about Muslims, Arabs, you can talk about Venezuelans and Argentinians and Brazilians and Americans and Canadians and Russians and anybody else, but apparently you can't talk about Jewish people. You can talk about Islamic people. You can be anti-Christian to say Christians are haters, but you can't talk about the Jewish people. Why is this? You suppose it may have something to do with the world's foremost problem? Like Henry Ford wrote in his books. The world's foremost problem, Henry Ford, the automaker. And the other 100 books I've gone over on these topics. And the one book that YouTube took down, Nestor Webster, The World Revolution, gave me 1 strike on my account. 2 more strikes, I guess they cancel your account. Butler lived most of his life in rural Victoria. In his later years, on a farm in Panton Hill, where his home was used as a meeting place for League and other patriotic activities. In the 1950s, he was a member of the Eltham Shire Council for some years and served as Shire president. He retired as League director in 1992, handing control of his organization to David Thompson, but remained politically active until shortly before his death. In 1999, he chaired an address by real historian David Irving. So you take a guy like Eric Butler, and the author of many of the books that I've gone over, all of those people, including me, did not have to do this trying to get the truth out at our own expenses. I probably had $500,000 in assets, a couple houses, property in Maine, boats, motorcycles, couple businesses, and I used up all those assets to be reading books and sharing this material for the last 14 years. It was an intentional decision on my part because I saw what seemed to be a plan to destroy the reality as we know it. And what good would the wealth have done me if I'd have worked that these past 14 years and just gained more money if they were just going to crash the whole system and take it like they do with the information we see about them saying there might be a world or a United States-wide grid collapse and terrorist event or martial law or World War III, economy collapse, terrorist, sustainability, global warming, climate change. To me, it seemed kind of important to do this research and find out WTH, what the heck is going on? You can't take the money with you when you leave planet Earth. There's more documents here. Here's one at worldcat.org, a whole list of his publications, worldcat.org. So if you look up Eric Dudley Butler, you can see all these documents that I found. And he created something called Australia First Party. Australia First. So like we now have President Donald Trump saying America first. So, you know, I think what it says here on Australia First Party Victoria, the Australia First Party advances Australian identity, freedom, and independence in contrast to the globalist, internationalist policies of the current holders of the state power in Australia. And I could change out the word Australia to the United States in this document, and it would be absolutely correct and applicable, in my opinion. Australia First, let's call it America First, an alternative to continuing servitude to the global capitalist, and places the national interest of Australians and Australia first. Our vision is that of a high culture fulfilling the aspirations passed down to present-day Australians from the pioneering and settling peoples for a new European-derived civilization. And they want to destroy that kind of society here in the United States, and I'm sure Europe, a lot of activity in that direction to dilute our culture completely. And some people would call that racist or white supremacist to point this out. But there is some kind of eugenics program going on, and there's many documents from Jewish authorities saying it's all intentional. I've gone over numerous of those books, but we're not supposed to read those books. We're not supposed to acknowledge what they're doing. Otherwise, we get accused of being an anti-Semite, a racist, a hater, if we don't go along with pansexualism, transgenderism, and all this globalism and Luciferian satanic symbolism. Something bigger than we all can even fathom seems to be going on. Who says that? I say that. And all these books I've been going over provide plenty of evidence that that's the case. Wherein our citizens productively participate and attain both the highest quality and enjoyment of life, commensurate with sustainability from our available resources. Australia firsters see our great old continent with its unique ecosystem as more than just a quarry for mining resources, a people dumping ground, or the exploitation of corporate interests parroting materialism and consumerism. So this is a huge problem all over the world. On the issues of strategic Australian manufacturing capability, self-sufficiency and foreign ownership, ecological sustainability, big business immigration, and or community-destroying multiculturalism, what the prevailing trader class advocates is against the interest of Australians and is undermining our civilization. Their globalist doctrines will see the Australian people perish. And again, that's what they're trying to do in the USA. According to my mind, my eyes, my ears, and my brain, my thinking, my rationalization, and many others, thousands, maybe millions of videos on YouTube, books out there, press releases, and so much more, verifies the things I'm saying. I'm not telling lies or providing deception. I want people to look these things up. Don't believe a thing I say. But if you go do your homework, you're going to find these same documents that I keep sharing. The Australian First Party is committed to regime change from this trader class. So wouldn't it be nice here in America, the USA, if we could get rid of all the political leaders and put the people back in charge? Wouldn't it be nice if probably Mexico was run that way, or Brazil, or any of the countries all over the world that have been taken over and apparently puppet leaders put in charge? And a lot of the leaders may honestly want to do right by their people, but if they try to do the right thing, then they will probably be eliminated, and many presidents have been assassinated. So it is a very tough thing when somebody needs to stand up and be brave and risk their lives to try to do the right thing. And remember, nobody gets off planet Earth alive. When we get to the other side of the reality, the invisible veil, heaven or Hades, I guess we have to answer for what we've done and our intent. It offers a beacon for men and women to step forward and join this challenge. If you don't fight, you lose. All right, see how much more. I did quite a bit of research on this man. Australian First Party in memory of Eric Butler. Mr. Butler was well known for his dedication to the Australian League of Rights, a service movement still active today in national politics. He founded the League in 1946 and was its national director in 1993. Mr. Butler was a sincere advocate of achieving freedom for Australians from the dead hand of enforced internationalism. He stumped across the country speaking at thousands of meetings. He was famous across the nation in political circles, even though he was little known by the general public. And you go on the internet, look up his name, and print out all these documents about him. A guy you probably would have never heard about. I'm glad I discovered him. Eric Butler was hated and lied by the big political parties, the banks, the Zionists, the liberal internationalists of all stripes, the biased journalist. He was no insignificant ideologue, but a man of sincere principles, struggling against the odds. Possibly no other Australian has been so systematically vilified, even a period from mid-1960s until the present, and even in death, his enemies have continued to malign him. As is the case with anyone involved in a movement that is dedicated to political social reform. Not every nationalist agreed with all of Mr. Butler's ideas and viewpoints. However, his drive, determination, and loyal patriotism was never in doubt. Especially noteworthy is that under his leadership, the League of Rights bravely campaigned against massive immigration, from the third world against government-induced multiculturalism and against the creeping assassination of Australia. And I have to say, when you talk about the United States or Europe or in Australia and all these countries that they're forcing all these immigrants into, these immigrants were perfectly happy where they were. Their countries were taken over by the mining uh, forces and industrial forces, and in the case of the Middle East, by the peoples planning a greater Israel. You can look at the maps. So they had to depopulate those places and depopulate the Middle East, and they needed to dilute our culture. So they had to put these people that were opposed to our culture in with us and who had seething hatred because of all the bombing and murder that had taken place. So, whoever these globalists are, they have put all these seeds for chaos and anarchy in our midst, and it appears to be all intentional. In the middle of the night, planes were landing in New York, etc., and buses were provided for all these Arabs that were dispersed around the rural communities all over the United States, marching them through the highways and streets all over Europe. We've seen the pictures in the news. And apparently they're doing the same thing with Australia, preaching this multicultural uh, philosophy and serious desires to destroy Christianity, all part of biblical fulfillment and teaching and promoting decadency and zombie type behavior, even with the anti straight family value philosophy, promoting the gay agenda, homosexual marriage, pansexualism, transgenderism, and people looking like freaks, if you want to be honest, and all of the graffiti on the buildings and bridges showing all the freaks and all kinds of symbols. Who's doing all this? Just natural occurrences by our children. Where do they get these ideas? Who's training them? And apparently the school systems are telling them that Jesus was just a myth. Well, let me finish reading this before I go on and on. Indeed, it must be recognized that the Australian League of Rights and Mr. Butler personally brought knowledge to many Australians of the great threat to the identity, independence, and freedom of our country. Countless people joined the patriotic resistance thanks to the tireless work of Eric Butler. It has been said that a true student of history could win a doctorate with a thesis. Bush prophet Eric Dudley Butler and the Australian League of Rights, if someone could produce such a work to write about him and his deeds in a neutral and independent manner, it would be a fitting tribute to a man who dedicated his life to the Australian people. Wow. Eric Butler. Got two more documents. I was trying to find that The International Jew by Eric Butler, but I found links to something, but I could never get the actual document. And on Yahoo search, I found references for Eric Butler. So how many were there? 242,000 results for Eric Dudley Butler. So the portion of the book I wanted to read about is called The Financing of Nazi Germany. And I've been reading this book, as you can see. You're not going to believe who financed Nazi Germany. Remember, they were defeated in World War I, financially crushed, million or so people murdered after the war, starved and everything else. Somebody intended to destroy Germany completely. And then between World War I and World War II, somehow they turned around and introduced Hitler into Germany, and he was financed by the banking system. And apparently, part of the communist plot, the globalist, the Zionist Jewish people, the Illuminati Freemasons, plan for a global world order. It's all strategic moves, and it's all been planned, as you'll see when I read from this book. The Enemy from Within the Empire by Eric Butler. I wish I could read all of this book, The Enemy Within the Empire by Eric Butler, which I did find the PDF document free on archive.org. So if you like what I'm saying from the couple pages I read, you can go on to archive.org and put in Eric Butler or The Enemy from Within. The Enemy Within the Empire, or Eric Butler. You should be able to find it. Anyways, I want to start here with the financing of Nazi Germany. But before I read from that, I just want to show you the previous pages that I have read. Fascinating, unbelievable material. This is another page. Another page. Another page. I just took these out. And another page. So I've read a good portion of the book. All right, start to read here. The financing of Nazi Germany. And I did ask myself a question when I was reading this. If what I'm about to talk about involves the banking system in Britain and the situation with Germany and Russia, and I just read to you some of the information about Australia, and apparently the banking system in the United States was taken over in 1913. So apparently everything I'm about to read about the Bank of England and its control on the world and who controls it also includes the USA and the Federal Reserve and the banking systems of other countries all over the world. So I wrote my notes here. What about the Federal Reserve? The United States, the world. Is the Fed controlled by a group of aliens, Zionist, Jewish, Illuminati, secret society types? As President John Kennedy said, and he said he was going to expose them, and he was assassinated. So these people get to decide who gets to eat, live, and enjoy life, and who gets to die. These people make the decisions. And what I'm about to read is quite revealing. In the British House of Commons on 16 April 1940, the beginning of World War II, Mr. Stokes asked the Chancellor of the Exchequer whether he could introduce legislation to alter the charter of the Bank of England so as to enable the names of the bank proprietors, the owners, together with the capital holding of each of such proprietor owners, to be published. Sir John Simon, no, sir. So he wanted to introduce legislation to make public the names of the people who controlled the Bank of England and how much money they had invested. And they were said, you can't do that, no. So Mr. Stokes, in view of the disastrous policy followed by the bank after the last war, World War I, and the part of it is believed to have played in the rearmament of Germany between World War I and World War II, so Germany was intentionally rearmed. Does the right honorable gentleman not consider it time that the people knew a bit more about the proprietors, the owners of this unique concern, the Bank of England? So we've heard the same things about the Federal Reserve, that they've been calling for audits or investigations. So apparently these private Zionist Illuminati secret society people working towards a global world order, monitoring us and policing us, everything we do, depopulating the planet. They don't want any interference with their affairs, with their goal of a global world order, new world order, and the installation of microwave technology systems, beast computer, artificial intelligence, weaponized systems, even legislation I've shown here in North Carolina. The state government passed laws that locals and state governments and people cannot interfere with the installation of the 5G system. Why would they pass legislation saying that? Because it's controlled from the top. All right, the following humorous item, which appeared in the News Chronicle on May 10th, 1940, is very pointed. Germany is an ungrateful beast, and I don't care who hears me say it, declares Miss Rudy Fossix, the Bank of England, May Queen for 1940. At Brighton yesterday, opening the 5 million or 5 billion Golden Calf Rest Home for the tired usurers. So they're opening a expensive rest home, the Golden Calf Rest Home for retired bankers. And she says at the opening, Germany is ungrateful beast, and I don't care who hears me say it. Why would Germany be an ungrateful beast after being destroyed after World War I, crippled for 10 or 20 years, and then they start supplying money and put Hitler in place, trained him apparently, took him to Britain and all these other people? It was all a plan by these globalists. Make no doubt about it. I've gone over a lot of material. This wasn't just a natural event. A wan smile from a Mr. Skinner and a frantic applause from the 5,000 city usurers, each with features more brutally degraded than the last, rewarded this stinging attack. Hail der Interest der Emperor alone. So they were saying, I guess some interpretation here is they're happy to get interest on the loans they were sending to Germany. Cried Sir Henry Glosspiel, a leading British financier, a resolution never to arm the Prussian spirit with money ever again till the present war is over was carried unanimously. All right, the next one says the Locarno and Chain for August 1939 published the following interesting item. In 1933, there appeared in the Holland a book written by a certain Sidney Warburg. Excuse me. So a book was published in Holland by Sidney Warburg, which quickly disappeared from the bookseller's windows. In it, the author stated that in the preceding year, 1932, he had attended meetings in the United States of financial gentlemen who were seeking means of subsidizing Hitler, financing. It appears that among those present were Sir Henry Dietering, representatives of Morgan's Bank, Mr. Montague Norman, governor of the Bank of England, and representatives of the Meldestone Bank. Mr. Montague Norman was openly in favor of supporting the new Hitler movement of 1931, 8 or 9 years prior to World War II. The Bank of England, whoever controlled England, wasn't the citizens. They were trying to expose these internationalist, Zionist, elitist, Illuminati types who controlled the Bank of England and apparently controlled the Federal Reserve in the United States. It's all here. Bank of England raised Germany, apparently to destroy it again. The Jewish Illuminati globalists needed to obtain Palestine and they needed to prepare for war. And remember, in 1880, Albert Pike, leader for the Freemasons in the United States, wrote a letter to his friend Mazzini in Italy saying that 3 world wars would be required to bring about a global world order. Now remember, we've had World War I and World War II. I believe maybe World War III has probably been started with the 9/11 event. If it hasn't, we have a real bad day coming. And of course, I just showed you the documents here of plans, December 2018, for surviving a catastrophic power outage. How many more clues do we need? By 1935, the Bank of England was openly pro-Nazi. 1935, the Bank of England was pro-Nazi. That doesn't mean the British people. Just like in the United States, we all have nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. There's no input from the citizens. They do what they want to do. If they crash the economy here in the USA, it will have been intentional. They have a lot of stocks invested and they can bring the system down. And apparently, according to one video I was watching this morning, the curves every day shows initially when the stock market in the US opens, it rises, it makes a dip, it stops, it rises again, and then it crashes. Every day, the same little curve. So somebody's milking the USA stock for money. They control it. When do the people freak out and bail out? That's an interesting question. So the Bank of England was openly pro-Nazi in 1935, as revealed in the Financial News of May 15th of that year. In 1937, the bankers said that, "We regret to have to admit that from a small but influential circle in the city of London, there flows a constant stream of propaganda in favor of credits for Germany." So they had to build up Germany, and even during World War II, the Lend-Lease program, I made a book review about that information. The United States gave Russia a blank check, communist Russia, a blank check. Planes, trains, trucks, jeeps, bombs, grenades, even the designs for nuclear weapons to communist Russia during World War II. If you watch that video, you must have fallen out of your chair. It's too unbelievable. The following report appeared in the Sydney Sun on April 3rd, 1941. A sharp attack on Mr. Montague Norman is made by the following editor of the conservative Financial News, urging a public inquiry into the governorship of the Bank of England. "We ought to probe more deeply into Mr. Norman's apparently unending reign as governor," he writes. "Any criticism of this reign from financial quarters is still regarded as something akin to sacrilege. But we ought to ask ourselves whether it is to Britain's advantage that Mr. Norman remains governor at such a critical period. Mr. Norman was largely responsible for our ill-advised return to the gold standard in 1925. And if you pay attention to the dates here in this document, apparently the people who controlled the Bank of England, controlled the Federal Reserve in the United States, all the monies were withdrawn for use, for commerce, for the citizens, causing a Great Depression all over the world. And I know we Americans are slightly aware of the Great Depression in the USA. But did you know it was going on in Britain and all over the world, and all of the monies and all of the credits were focused to build up Germany and Russia? Reading this stuff just blew me away. So he strongly opposed the Treasury's cheap money policy, and he reversed. Shortly before the outbreak of the war, he pursued a policy of financial appeasement towards Germany. Until the outbreak, he allowed the city to overlend to Germany. He did not exert his influence to obtain a reduction in excessive German bank debts. As anyone with even an elementary knowledge of the present financial system knows, the Bank of England did not send millions of pounds to Germany. These billions of pounds, millions of pounds, created out of nothing by the Bank of England, were written up as a credit to Germany in Britain. Germany could then buy goods in Britain for this amount. A loan of 80 million pounds, which is more than dollars, of Germany would mean that Germany could buy that amount of materials in Britain. So they didn't ship over their truckloads of money. They just allowed them to have credit for like billions of dollars, and they could buy everything they needed. They didn't have to manufacture it or whatever. They could just buy it on this money that they obviously were never going to be able to pay back, which is the situation we are here in the United States today. Who's been financing all this world wars going on since 9/11? We the people, and the debt keeps going up and up and up. The terrible fact emerges that the British people were working to rearm their future enemies because they did not control the financial policy. This is going on in the USA today. It's going on in the world today. And they kept the USA people broke too, the Great Depression. This was all intentional. Albert Pike wrote in 1880 that 3 world wars would be required to bring about a global world order. For 300 years, the Zionists have wanted the Palestinians' land. It's all coming to fruition. Biblical prophecy is being fulfilled. I know people don't want to hear that, but that's what it is. They're going to rebuild King Solomon's temple. I was watching a rabbi teaching a class over there in Israel, saying that they were going to destroy the dome and rebuild the temple and make all the Arabs their slaves. Protocols of Zions and many other books indicate they're going to make all the world's people their slaves. This is definitely a satanic thing. The same individuals who were building up Germany were keeping Britain weak by telling people that there was a shortage of money. According to this Eric Butler, and I've read you his resume. So the Great Depression was intentional. They were telling the people, probably even here in America, there didn't have to be a Great Depression in America. They just print money. Look at the pictures of the Great Depression. See how horrific it was. These evil forces are planning another event like this again, like World War I and World War II, World War III. Another 9/11 probably, some big event. Stanley Baldwin, one of the chief puppets of the Bank of England, openly admitted on one occasion that he kept the fact concerning Germany rearmament from the British people in order to win the general election. We have that kind of shenanigans going on now in the USA. Mr. Paul Enzing says in World Finance, 1918 to 1936, that there can be no doubt that practically the whole of the free exchange available to Germany for purchase of raw materials was supplied directly and indirectly by Great Britain in giving her enemy free exchange for the purpose of raw materials. If the day of reckoning ever comes, the liberal attitude of the British government in this matter may be well responsible for the lives of British soldiers and civilians. So we can add to that the American soldiers and civilians. Peoples all over the world. Serbians, Austrians, Japanese. Oh my. The people who control our planet. Does anybody really believe they're not going to do it again? All indications show that they are. They're planning for the grid to come down, and there's so much more. If you just pay attention to the nightly news, quite bizarre, quite regularly. These facts are widely recognized by responsible authorities all over the world. Unfortunately, the people and their governments have very little to say concerning policy. Amen to that. They don't listen to us. Matter of fact, a lot of people have been assassinated trying to interfere with these plans for a global world order. Discredited, ruined. The following is an extract from a report of an interview with Miss Lily Byrne of Sydney, had with Mr. Mackenzie King, Prime Minister of Canada, when she was lecturing in Canada, reported in the New Era, February 14, 1941. Miss Burney, why on earth, Mr. Prime Minister, do you not keep these promises? She was referring to one of Mr. Mackenzie King's statements in 1935 when he said he would take control of the issue of credit and currency on the behalf of Canada. The people would have immortalized you. So she's asking the leader of Canada, why don't we print our own money like you said during the campaign? What do you suppose he said? Mr. Mackenzie King, I guess that's his name, Mackenzie King, rather sadly, in a slow tone. Well, we do the best we can, Miss Burney. Miss Burney, well, it's a terrible position we are in. English and American finance gave Hitler the money. English and American finance gave Germany the money, Hitler. Metals and chemicals to slaughter our men, women, and children and destroy the British Empire. Forgive me, Mr. Prime Minister, for speaking so hotly. Mackenzie King says, I agree with you. I never did agree with financing Hitler. So does anybody not agree with me that the Americans and the Brits were rearming Germany? And it gets more ominous as I read along. The following extracts are from a sensational article which appeared in Ken, Chicago, USA, November 3rd, 1938. The article was reprinted in many journals throughout the world and caused a considerable stir. In the spring of 1934, a select group of city financiers gathered around Montague Norman, that was a leader over there in Britain of the Bank of England, in a windowless building in Bank of England on Threadneedle Street. Among those present were Sir Alan Anderson. So I made some notes here. Even the poor Germans, Austrians, Serbian, the world, Japan nuked. World War II was brought about by the international bankers. And all that suffering, all that death, all those movies they made about it, making heroes out of Americans or whoever. If they only knew, if all those people who died only knew. And what about World War III? Does anybody really believe they're not going to fulfill? Do they believe Albert Pike was wrong? Do they not believe all the things we see shown right in our faces? They published this thing even with the government. These recent documents, December 13th, 2018, surviving a catastrophic power outage, and so much more. All the propaganda, social conditioning, climate change, CO2, pollution. It's all part of a plan. The following extracts are from a sensational article which appeared in Ken. I wrote that. The article was reprinted in many journals throughout the world and caused a considerable stir. In the spring of 1934, a select group of city financiers gathered around Montague Norman. I read all that. Next page. So some of the people that were there were Anderson, Green and Company, Lord, the then St. Sir Joseph Stamp, chairman of the LMS Railway System, Edward Shaw, chairman of P&O Steamship Lines, Robert Kindersley, partner in Lazar Brothers, Charles Hambro, partner of Hambros Brothers, C.T. Tarks, a lot of huge corporations and wealthy leaders around the world, head of the Schroeder Company. But now a new power was established on England's political horizon, namely Nazi Germany. Hitler had disappointed his critics. His regime was no temporary nightmare. We had unlimited credit with the Bank of England and a Bank of America, probably, the Federal Reserve. And the Bank of America was in there with that. Included Hitler in their plans. There was no opposition, and it was decided that Hitler should get covert help from London's financial section until Mr. Norman had succeeded in putting sufficient pressure on the government to make it abandon its pro-French policy for a more promising pro-German orientation. Oh my, they were trying to abandon their pro-France policy and wanted to go with a pro-German policy. So these warmongers, these internationalists, planned all of this. And then later on, we had World War II, and everybody was riled up and told that the Germans were evil and all of that stuff. World War II. Immediately, the directors went into action. Their first move was to sponsor Hitler's secret rearmament, just about to begin. Using their controlled interest in both Vickers and the imperial chemical industries, they instructed these two huge armament concerns to help Germany program by all means at their disposal. Help the Germany program by all means at their disposal. In the same year, English armament firms placed huge advertisements in the Milter Schrisker Waltrambaut, some kind of magazine, I guess, offering for sale tanks and guns prohibited by the Versailles Treaty. And I wrote, what in here? I couldn't believe what I was reading. I wrote, what? So they're advertising in German newspapers tanks and guns for sale in Germany, and of course giving them all the credit in the world. A statement made by General Sir Herbert Lawrence, chairman of Vickers, furnished the necessary evidence that the British government knew about and approved these advertisements. When, at his company's annual meeting, he was asked to give the assurances that Vickers' arms and munitions were not being used for secret rearming in Germany, he replied, I cannot give you assurance in definite terms, but I can tell you that nothing is done without the complete sanction and approval of our government. So just like the secret investors controlling the Federal Reserve in the USA, back 100 or so years ago, Cromwell, who had the King of England assassinated, him and the Jewish investors from Holland were then allowed back into Britain after being exiled from all the European countries, and basically took over the commons and the Britain banking system, and basically Britain, controlled by these Zionist Jewish Illuminati types. And a lot of Jewish people have been trying to warn the rest of us. Rabbi Mara van Antelman, in his book, To Eliminate the Opaque, people who believe in God. Henry Mackay, Canadian author, wrote the book, Jewish author. Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. Nestor Webster, the World Revolution. And another 100 or maybe 150 books in my series on Freemasonry and Satanism. Book after book I go over. Piece of evidence, another piece of evidence, another piece of evidence. All right, continuing on here. The excuse had been made that although the financing of Nazi Germany did take place, it was for the purpose of building a rampart against Russian communism. When I read this, I almost fell out of my chair. So the excuse for Britain for rearming Germany is they feared communist Russia. And during World War II, Russia joined the United States, and the United States gave Russia a blank check and supplied them with everything, while Britain was supplying Germany with everything. Does that boggle your mind? And Russia, meanwhile, between World War I and World War II, were killing 100 million Christians and other good people, according to a document on jeffrentz.com, and other documents I've researched. You can look it up. So when the Bolshevik invasion happened in 1917, it continued for 10, 15, 20 years. I don't know all the details, but right up until World War II. And they were slaughtering the Christians and other good people, destroying the Christian churches, not the Jewish temples. It was communist. Communist was evil. They were having communist hearings in the United States, and the communists were caught infiltrating politics in the United States, and so much more. And the communism is Zionist Judaism, and it is the Illuminati, mystery religion of Babylon, Satanism, synagogue of Satan. According to all this research, I've been going over and over and over. If you've been watching my videos on all these different books, this is series 246. Eric Butler, and you've seen his resume. That's why I went through all of that. I wanted to know who this guy was. What kind of authority was he to be able to be writing these things? This was a journalist for the newspaper, somebody who ran for politics, served in the military, was candidate for officers' school, and so much more. Wrote a lot of stuff about the globalization and the import of immigrants from around the world, third world countries, intentionally to dilute our cultures. This is as well as a physical thing like a world war and murder. It's a psychological war also. It's anti-Christian. It's social conditioning. It's pansexual, transgender. All these things we see. It's the graffiti on the buildings with the skulls and the bones and the demons and the tattoos and everything else. TV programs called zombies. If people can't see this, they don't want to see it. Nothing I can do further than trying to show these books that were published by these people that would be lost in obscurity. And I'm not the only person out there doing this. Anybody can do a little research and find these authors. Places like archive.org seems to have a lot of free PDF books. Look up Protocols of Zion or Zionism or this book here, The Enemy Within the Empire, Eric Butler, and so many others, Nestor Webster, Quigley, and all these other authors who wrote so much material. Free PDF, there's no excuse. But people say, oh, I can't do that. I can't read. I can't think. I can't watch a 2-hour video. I get exasperated. I say, well, how are we going to defend our world from World War III when people won't wake up? Whenever I leave this planet, I get before the pearly gates. St. Peter comes to get me, and I'm going to say, I tried to say something. Too few people were listening. Too few people were not copying the links to my videos and sending it to other people. Forget my videos. Copy the links to other people's videos. Buy books and send them to your friends. Newspaper clippings. Point it out. Say, that's not right. That's not right. They shouldn't be killing the Arabs. 911 was an inside job. They shouldn't be dumping chemicals in the sky. Those microwave transmitters probably are not a good idea. Artificial intelligence, probably not a good idea. FEMA camps, coffins in fields all across the country, probably not a good idea. Making the people of the world hate America, bringing all this decadency right out on the streets with the gay pride parades, which they blow up on TV over there in China. The Chinese people think we're mad. We're insane. We're sick. We're mentally ill. You think they're doing this in the United States on purpose so they can video that stuff and show those people to instigate them to be part of a raid, an invasion of America because we're all lost our minds, we're demons? Do you see how the world perceives us? And I'm reading a book on that right now. It has plenty of evidence that with all these media outlets and producers trying to create certain images of us, and we're just playing into their hands, walking down the street in a gay pride parade with a sign that says, I bet hell is fabulous. I've showed that picture. And there's many more. Look at those signs. The women's march parades with expensive signs, gay pride parades with expensive signs, white supremacist events with expensive signs, Black Lives Matter with expensive signs. Who's financing all of this? Websites even created telling people where to meet and gather and disperse. Who's creating all this? Make no bones about it. It is all an intentional program. Back to this thing. So we can see here who's building up Nazi Germany, the Bank of England, and who's building up Russia, the Federal Reserve. I've gone over that book review. Series number 242, Major Jordan's Diaries. Back to this document. I quite appreciate this viewpoint. for the purpose of building rapport against Russian communists. So the Britons were fearing Russian communism. It was the Russian communists who were controlling the Bank of England, the Illuminati. So these Zionist Jewish Illuminati, mystery religion of Babylon, secret societies, Freemasons, high-level Freemasons, not the low-level people that we all know, those people who are involved in these organizations and know not what they're into, and all the other secret societies that President John Kennedy said he was going to expose and was repugnant to the American way of life. He was assassinated shortly thereafter. I appreciate this viewpoint and believe that many sincere British interests were made the victims of a carefully drawn up program of propaganda, social conditioning. They own the newspapers and everything else. So it's not the British citizens who are at fault. It's not the American citizens who are at fault. It's not the Iraqi citizens who are at fault. And probably a lot of Russian citizens are not at fault. Israeli citizens are probably not at fault. Chinese citizens probably are being programmed. This goes right to the top with all the media, computers monitoring us, slowly targeting people, targeted individuals, mind control. They've been studying this for the last 100 years quite intensely. They know what they're doing. They know what they're going to do. They're putting the system in place. The fear of communism was deliberately played upon. Eric Butler. I showed you his resume. He wrote this book. Little did many people know that the real controllers of the Bank of England, the Jewish oligarchy of Wall Street, were also very interested in Russia. So it's in this book. I'm not making this stuff up. You can read it. Pause your computer. Where my finger was. It says Jewish oligarchy of Wall Street was also very interested in Russia. So part of the plan was with these Illuminati, Zionist Jewish types and world elites into some mystery religion of Babylon, synagogue of Satan, is they were after the resources all over Russia. And probably that's why they're having all the fires in California. Remember, California was a gold state, and all those people owned the land and their homes, so all that had to be destroyed to be made available for some evil person's use. This is what they do. They destroy everything. World War I, World War II, 9/11. Then they take everything. They control the money system and they crash the system, causing depressions and recessions in the United States 8 times since 1913. They take everything again and again and again. And people don't want to seem to be any wiser about it. I believe that the people acquiesce. I believe that the opposition between Germany, Russia, Japan, Italy was for the deliberate purpose of making the British people acquiesce in a policy which was weakening the foundation of the empire, the British Empire. And lordy, lordy, they certainly did that here in the USA with 9/11. None of us knew what was going on. We were all caught blindsided that day. And it is an antichrist global world order new age at work. Back to this article. The following extract from an article by D.E. Falcon Jones in the Fig Tree, England. So when I mentioned these documents, some kind of magazines back then, or newspapers, the Fig Tree. June 1937 is almost prophetic when we see the position today. Secret fear makes us seize eagerly on the comfortable assumption that the three militaristic powers, Russia, Germany, and Japan, are to be reckoned with, are arming for the internecine conflict. So prior to World War II, there were people that were aware of this and publishing it. And Britain was financing Germany, and America, Federal Reserve, was interested in Russia financing the communists. And the communists were murdering millions of people, infiltrating politics and organizing communist groups in the United States covertly, prepared to take to the streets and probably kill the leaders if they were to cause a revolution in the USA. It is what it is. At least temporarily, for the dismemberment of the British Empire. An appearance of mutual enmity between the two or three conspirators would recommend itself as a simple political means of delaying British rearmament as long as possible, should therefore be discounted by prudent statesmen. And I've read a lot of this book here, The Enemy Within the Empire. And at the same time, huge corporations and banking institutions were shutting down all the shipyards all over Britain and much of the world intentionally. Why would they want to be demilitarizing Britain while they were militarizing Russia and Germany and causing all kinds of other activities in Serbia and in America with propaganda? They were making a lot of films and showing it to the American people about the evil monster Germans. So who do you think the monsters really are when you read this article about the financing and armament of, I could see giving Germany food and other things and helping it grow again after World War I, but not armaments and chemicals and warfare and technologies. Somebody wanted World War II, and Albert Pike in 1880 sent a letter to his friend Mazzini, and all kinds of other books and propaganda about the global world order and communism. This has been going on a long time, and the Zionist plans to take control of the Middle East. It's in the Encyclopedia Judaica. I've made many videos on that. Those people were working feverishly, controlling governments and banking institutions. They had a worldwide plan, and it encompassed hundreds of years. People like me and people who watch this video, common citizens, we can't fathom that they're on that kind of time scale. I guess we're kind of myopic. We only see that little tiny sliver in time, and that's our daily life. We don't see the bigger picture, where they probably in the year 2030 might have the whole planet destroyed or enslaved. I wonder what the people then will say. Why didn't the people back then do something? Didn't anybody say anything? People like Eric Butler and these other 245, 46 book authors I've gone over, 606 videos on YouTube, and millions of other people's videos, and people like David Icke and Alex Jones, whether you like them or not, and so many others are screaming at the top of their lungs. Richie from Boston, Deborah Traveris, and so many others trying to warn people. And of course, there's a lot out there trying to deceive people. I couldn't believe when I was watching that UFO video by Paul Helliyard of Canada, when he said he's been dealing, or they've been dealing with the aliens, and the aliens have been watching the Earthlings play with the nuclear bombs like they're matches, children playing with matches. And that the aliens were seriously concerned about an overpopulated planet. Does anybody really believe that? Mr. Paul Helliyard lost all credibility with me when he said that the aliens are worried about too many people on the planet. That should point out to anybody. You can look up Paul Helliyard, his recent video, just put his name in the computer, UFOs, and sort it out by the most current, and you'll see the video. I've made a lot of videos on the book, the population bomb, the limits to growth, the report from Iron Mountain, and so many more. This information just keeps going on and on and on and on, and it all seems to have a common denominator here. Yes? No. All right, common sense would suggest a very different view. The view that it would pay the three to unite, at least temporarily, for the dismemberment of the British Empire. An appearance of mutual enmity between the two of the three conspirators would recommend itself as a simple and political means of delaying British armament as long as possible and should therefore be discounted by prudent statesmen. So does anybody really believe that Italy and Germany and Japan wanted a war and were getting together to destroy the British Empire? And who controlled the banking system in the British Empire, the Bank of England? It says it clearly right here. I read it. The Jewish oligarchy on Wall Street. The Illuminati, secret societies, controlling factions all over the world. Russia's pacts with Germany and Japan, although only a temporary and expedient nature, as demonstrated by Hitler's attack on Russia, confirm the above viewpoint. Clashes between Hitler and Stalin must not blind us to the fact that National Socialism and Marxist socialism are only different sects of the one religion. So for the next maybe 15, 20 years after World War I, Germany's neighbor, Russia, communist Russia, which had an iron curtain up, a blackout, nobody could get in, was murdering 100 million Christians and other good people. You got to keep all this in the back of your mind. What was going on while this was happening? They were murdering the people that they thought would get in the way. Now here in the United States, apparently, there's been a lot of videos that they're collecting metadata on all of us. And there is one category system of the red dot, yellow dot, green dot. Apparently, not too long ago, they were actually putting red dots and yellow dots and green dots on people's mailboxes. So red dot meant you're to be killed. You're not going to go along with the Luciferic global world order. Yellow dot says you probably go to an internment camp or some kind of slave factory or farming slave business. And the green dots, you probably have a skull and bones tattoo on your body and you're pro-Satanist. And you're probably going to get along just great with this global world order. Throwing a little sarcastic in there, but something like that. There's plenty of videos on it. I've got copies of those videos with all that information. I've been collecting information on these topics since 2005. Every day, every week, every month, every year. Closing in on 15 years. Making videos since 2013 after I was reading books and doing research for almost 10 years. That was a commitment I made to myself. I didn't want to go public until I had studied for 10 years. I didn't think I would have the right to an opinion until I'd read all those books and tried to figure it out. All right. Russia's pact with Germany and Japan, although only a temporary and expedient nature as demonstrated by Hitler's attack on Russia, confirm the above viewpoint. Clashes between Hitler and Stalin must not blind us to the fact that National Socialism and Marxist socialism are only different sects of the one religion. That would be communism, and part of that is fulfilling synagogue of Satan biblical prophecy. An overwhelming victory for either sect would be a further danger to the British way of life. So this is the propaganda they were preaching to the British people. And what were they preaching to the American people? They weren't telling the British people they were arming Germany. In America, they weren't telling the people they were arming Russia, supplying them with everything above the American people in the military, denying the people in Britain and America and people all over the world financial resources, and there was a Great Depression and a lot of insane suffering. These are truths. But what if people know these truths? I mean, why wouldn't people step up and say, this is wrong? Don't believe any of my research. Go do your own. Mine can be a guideline so you know what to go look up. But if you verify this stuff and you become convinced it's real, then what do? You need to share it with people. There's many more of us than them. They're afraid of being found out. While Britain's defenses were being depleted, particularly her navy, the totalitarian countries were being built up. Director Montague Norman kept the British shipbuilding yards closed. So they were intentionally closing the shipbuilding yards. It was not without significance that the governors of both Ramsay MacDonald and Stanley Baldwin, dominated by Wall Street, and the Bank of England played a big part in destroying Britain's naval power. By no stretch of imagination could it be suggested that the British Navy was ever likely to be used in an aggressive role. It was essential for the defensive purpose of keeping the trade routes of your empire open. Written in the Fig Tree, March 1937, D.E. Faulkner Jones said, "If America had insisted strongly and openly on the repayment of our immense debt to her, there would have been no alternative but to expose the real truth." So America's Federal Reserve was sustaining Britain. And meanwhile, in America, there was the Great Depression. Money and supplies and food was being withheld from the American people. I know that doesn't touch people that are alive today because they can't even imagine. But if you go look at the pictures on Yahoo image site, the Great Depressions, please go look at those pictures. Try to imagine what they did. Used us, abused us, lied to us, deceived us, and got us in World War I and World War II. And because of that, like 9/11, they'll probably get us in World War III, and people won't even know why. They won't know the impending globalism doom facing them. They're going to follow all this garbage about going green and globalism, sustainability, terrorism, when it's the elites that are bringing us all these problems. Dumping chemicals in the sky, installing microwave transmitters, artificial intelligence, surveillance systems, propaganda, social conditioning, anti-Christian propaganda. People believe it, buying it hook, line, and sinker. The so-called investors in America no more desired this exposure than our own rulers, but they pressed their advantage home and made Britannia give up her title as mistress of the sea. So we are now unable to protect our coast, let alone our food routes. Future historians may well find a very potent cause in the financial control exercised by America. The writer is referring to Wall Street. Excuse me on my speaking sometimes. Hopefully I'm conveying some clear information here. Again, archive.org, I think it is. You can go got so many documents here. But archive.org, you can go find this book, The Enemy Within the Empire. I do get tired of speaking after a while. Eric Butler. And read this stuff for yourself. Print out, it's only like 40 or 50 pages in this book he wrote. The writer is referring to Wall Street. Over us in the first years immediately after the war, when our financial policy was watched over directly by the American advisor, this control existed not because we owed America money, it existed because our government could not pay. America, the true debt we owed her, which was a debt of goods, not money, without explaining to the public the secret of credit creation. So they were giving Germany all the credit, Britain all the credit, feeding the Germans, feeding the Britons, feeding the Russians, preparing the world for World War II. You would think people would be upset about this. This control existed not because we owed American money, it existed because our government could not pay. So it wasn't American money. We people, the citizens, suffered and paid with the Great Depression and so much more. since they took over the American money supply. Remember, Abraham Lincoln wanted to have America print its own money. They killed him. President John Kennedy wanted to expose these secret elements controlling our world. They killed him. And so many other people have been assassinated, murdered, discredited. It was quite easy to persuade the English to weaken fatally their first and essential aggressive line of defense, the Navy. The instructed press ingeniously smote the chord of self with trembling past the music out of sight. So the media, the newspapers over there were deceiving the people. They were shutting down the shipyards. There was a shameless press exploitation of every generous emotion, every heartthrob of repentance for the 4 years of butchery, which a healthy instinct made us feel to a common responsibility of all the participants, enemy and allies alike. So you can imagine over there in Britain and Europe, they were on the front lines of World War II. So that was probably affecting them like any other post-war trauma, like the soldiers coming home from the Middle East, 9/11, Iraq. During the high tide of this emotion, our Navy was quite shorn of its strength. In view of the seriousness of Britain's shipping position in this war, the following extract from an editorial in Social Credit of September 20th, 1935. A typical attack launched by loyal Britishers against the treacherous policy of the Bank of England is well worth quoting. By a strange twist of irony, a Bank of England concern, which has probably done more in the past few years to undermine the British security than all of the communists and all of the machinists of foreign powers put together, is called the National Shipbuilding Security Ltd. A more suitable name would be the International Bankers Security. For this concern is engaged in the making of ship-owning safe for bankers who now control the British mercantile marine. So this Bank of England, these investors were controlling the British shipping ships. It is rationalizing the shipbuilding industry by scrapping so-called redundant yards. So they're closing down the shipping building yards all over the Britain and Britain's empire. According to its annual report, this company has spent in the last 3 years a total of £1,153,387, however much money that is, to buy shipbuilding yards. So in today's money, it's billions of dollars. To buy shipbuilding yards for the deliberate purpose of scrapping them. To replace this destruction would cost at least 20 times as much. So they were destroying all the shipping building yards, scrapping them, and to rebuild all of that would have cost 20 times as much. So if they spent a couple billion buying up the shipping yards, the existing ones, closing them down, so let's say 20 billion, so it would cost 20 times that to rebuild the new ones. This is but one more instance of the sabotage of real wealth in an attempt to make facts fit an archaic financial system. I must be getting tired. All right, I'm going to finish this up. I've been reading this book for a couple days, The Enemy Within the Empire, Eric Butler, and looking for some of his other books. I did find one here that's kind of interesting. The Root of All Evil. I'll printed out the whole thing, so I'll be reading it next. About 40 pages. In the meantime, I want to finish this one just on the topic, the financing of Nazi Germany. And there's a lot more information. You can go find this book on archive.org. I highly suggest people do. There's so much information here. This guy's done so much important part of history trying to expose these people who control the banking system and plan a global world order matching the biblical prophecy, as you can see here explained in this book. The root of all evil is about the synagogue of Satan in the Bible and the money changers. I have been reading this. The root of all evil. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. It's in the Bible, Matthew 6.24. It's a very interesting book you can look up. The essence of Christ's message was that every individual was unique and counted in the eyes of God, that he was primarily concerned with the salvation of individuals, not with groups or nations, that the kingdom of God was within each individual who could come to know the Father through the Son. So apparently Eric Butler was into a lot of stuff and a religious man, and was paying attention to how this kind of matched biblical prophecy with these people controlling the banking systems and bringing so much death and destruction to the planet. So let me finish this particular section of this book on the financing of Nazi Germany. Only about this much more to go here, where you can see on the screen. This is but one more instance of the sabotage of real wealth in an attempt to make the facts fit an archaic financial system. Those who remember the submarine blockade in the last war, so during World War I, Germany had a lot of submarines and had taken down their British shipping fleet. Germany was controlling the waterways, which resulted in the loss of millions of tons of ships and thousands of human lives. That would be the submarine blockade of Britain, nearly resulting in starving this country into surrender. So those who remember should ponder the dangerous activities of the national shipbuilders' security, particularly at the present time. We trust that if, unfortunately, war comes again, no plea of ignorance or sound financial reasons will enable those responsible for this sabotage to escape the penalty of traitors. Should Britain suffer for lack of these yards to build ships to replace those sunk? So apparently the banking system, the Bank of England, the bankers' security were buying up all the shipping yards and closing them down prior to World War II. So why would the people who financed Germany, and from America they were financing Russia, be shutting down all the British shipbuilding yards? Something more here than meets the eye. And yet we are told that the Bank of England is today more powerful than ever. And here in the United States, obviously, they control America and the world, and can drop the stock market and our economy anytime they want, collapse it, and bring us into a situation of national collapse, martial law. Who knows what they'll do? Mr. James Griffin's Linnelly, he says, I came into this house, that would be the Congress in Britain, very largely because of the way the industry was being neglected. We are paying the price for the last 20 years in allowing our industrial equipment to rust and rot. For 20 years, we lived in a period when coal mines, workshops, shipbuilding yards were being closed down. By whom? By the financiers of this country. Now think about that in the United States with all this sustainability and all of that. They're closing down the coal mines, the workshops, shipbuilding yards, and so much more in this country, and bringing us all these mega marts and depots, and putting all the small businessmen, the middle class people, out of business, eliminating the middle class, turning homeowners into renters across the nation, across the world. Continuing on with this document, I cannot give way as I have not much time and I am entitled to make my point. So this guy's speaking before the Congress. I want the nation to remember that for 20 years we have pursued a policy of restricting and cutting down production, and now we are paying the price for it. So they're doing the same thing in the USA, and if we have World War III, will we be paying the price for it? I will give one example. What this nation gave today for a shipbuilding yard in Jarrow. Who closed down Jarrow? Jarrow was closed by the Bank of England. And I made some notes here happening now, Agenda 21, climate change, sustainability, globalism, New Age, anti-Christian propaganda, social conditioning. And it's happening now, 2019, worldwide. So this speaker before Congress says this, looking back over past history, it is almost beyond comprehension that the Bank of England should be allowed to continue its domination of the financial policy of the empire, fighting for its very existence. All loyal Britishers will make every effort to make these facts as widely known as possible in order that this internal financial cancer can be removed and thus allow the British Empire to develop its tremendous potential strength. And I would say that about the United States of America. We are under attack. Such a step would bring us real victory within a remarkable short time. So if we could just get rid of all these corrupt politicians and elites who are controlling our world, get rid of the Federal Reserve and America print its own money, instead of having America finance billions and trillions to take over the globe that apparently we, the people of the United States, are responsible for. There's all kinds of weird things going on with the surveillance systems and the chemicals dumped in the sky, polluting the soil, killing the birds and the bees, making humans sick, taking over the medical establishment, education establishment, owning the press, the newspapers, TV, the movies, magazines, and everything else. What do you think is going on? Thank you for watching this video. Rick Miracle reporting.